and not even 24 hours go by when his cellmate, Luis Romero, is discovered dead. The way that he unalived him is extremely horrific. Jaime was able to get a hold of and made a shaft out of the where he cut the fingers off of his cellmate, and he also cut the ribs out and even the lung of his cellmate and decapitated him. Then wrote on the wall with the blood, "Ha ha ha," and wrote on the wall, "I am the man with 1,000 faces." He made a necklace out of the body parts of his cellmate, and when the cops came to his cell, he was in there covered in blood, surrounded by Luis Romero's body parts. The story of Jaime Osuna is probably one of the darkest and saddest stories that I came across. Jaime was born in Bakersfield, California to a 19-year-old mom and a 21-year-old father. Shortly after he was born, they ended up getting a divorce because of how toxic their relationship was. His mom, Michelle, did find somebody else, Jeff, and they got married, but Jeff was very abusive towards Jaime. He'd often hit him and he'd even starve him. Michelle didn't really care and stayed with him. At one point, he threw baby Jaime out of the car because he lost his temper. Jeff had a child of his own, and he was completely normal with him. At one point, Jeff did end up going to jail for a few days because of how abusive he was towards Jaime. At the age of 12, Jaime moved in with his grandmother, and he went to juvie because he stabbed somebody. And when he was in juvie, his stepfather ended up having a heart attack and passed away. At age 19, Jaime was let go from juvie, and he decides to go to a house party, and that's where he meets his future wife. Let's call her Jane. Jane's throwing a party for her 16-year-old son. Jaime shows up. He gets in an altercation and stabs somebody, so he goes right back to jail even though he just got out. After the stabbing, Jaime has to serve about a year in prison. He continues to write Jane to tell her how much he loves her and how much he wants to be with her. So Jane goes and picks him up and is shocked by how many tattoos he has. They get it on at a hotel and she becomes pregnant. So around February of 2010, they get married and the child is born afterwards. So Jaime becomes extremely abusive now, not only towards her, but also her children. And that's where Jane draws the line and decides to call the cops. She has him arrested and he now has to serve 6 months in prison. Jaime is released Halloween of 2011. Even after Jaime is released, he continues to harass Jane. One day on November 8th, 2011, he calls her and she thinks that it's because he's trying to harass her, but he says that he's killed someone at the Morocco Hotel. Jane is extremely worried and she calls the cops, and the cops do absolutely nothing. It isn't until 5 days later that one of the employees at the Morocco Hotel finds Yvette Pena's body and calls the cops.
I am calling from the Morocco Hotel, and I climbed to the lady that is here at the motel, and my cleanup guy in the room, and it's all standing in the back. Is dead. Oh my gosh, what room is this? Room number 19 at the Morocco Motel.
The cops eventually find Jaime and discover that it was indeed him, although Jaime is denying it. Yvette Pena was a mother of 6. Her autopsy revealed that she was a victim of blunt force trauma and also shock force trauma. Investigators even say that this was one of the most horrific crime scenes that they have ever seen. So Jaime is detained and he continues to deny it. His trial isn't set for another 5 years, and while these 5 years take forever to happen, he continues to harass Jane by sending her letters written in blood. He even at one point sends her a mashed up rat in the mail. During those 5 years, there's several hearings and Yvette's family goes to testify. At one point, Yvette's sister is saying that she has hope that Jaime regrets what he does, and the camera cuts to him and he starts mouthing, no. He does these creepy things where he smiles and he does little waves at them, and he just shows no regret for what he's done to Yvette Pena. He continues to deny that he did it up until 3 days before the actual trial, and he does an interview. At the interview, he confesses to the interviewer that he did do it. He also mentioned that from ages 8 and 9, he would kill animals, and he'd do it for the rush. Also said that he killed someone at age 13, a 27-year-old, and he says that he did it simply for the rush. After he confesses, he's given the option of either doing a life sentence without the possibility of parole or given the death sentence. And he chooses to go with the life sentence without parole. Shortly after, the guards discover that he's way too dangerous to have a cellmate. He's stabbing other inmates and even writing messages with their blood on the walls. It isn't until March of 2019 that he's given a cellmate, and not even 24 hours go by when his cellmate, Luis Romero, is discovered dead. The way that he unalived him is extremely horrific. Jaime was able to get a hold of and made a shaft out of the where he cut the fingers off of his cellmate, and he also cut the ribs out and even the lung of his cellmate and decapitated him. He then wrote on the wall with the blood, "Ha ha ha," and wrote on the wall, "I am the man with 1,000 faces." He made a necklace out of the body parts of his cellmate, and when the cops came to his cell, he was in there covered in blood, surrounded by Luis Romero's body parts. Jaime requested photos of the crime scene, but the judge denied it. Like I said, this was probably one of the saddest and darkest stories that I came across, and thankfully he's going to be serving the rest of his life in psychiatric prison.